It's time to look at the weekend newspapers, and to help me make sense of the headlines, I'm joined by Daniel Friedman. He's a news editor at Citizen's online platform, as well as investigative journalist Sabelo Skiti from the Mail and Guardian. Gentlemen, thank you so very much for coming up to talk to us about the headlines. Daniel, let me start with you. We see here the Sunday Times. I just want our camera to focus on it. MEC's faulty Merck scam. I was speaking to my panel earlier that was speaking about cutting costs and cutting the fat.
Yeah.
Here's an MEC who literally forged papers so that he can get a brand new vehicle. There's nothing wrong with the vehicle. The vehicle just had a puncture, but he doesn't want to drive in the vehicle.
Yeah.
Is this an indication that Tito Mbowene's message is actually being ignored in the public sector?
I mean, I have no doubt that it is. Sabelo was saying outside we were both quite surprised. It's been a while since we've had a good meaty scandal like this, especially involving cars.
Yes.
And I was saying I don't know much about Mshengu. You were saying you do know about him, that you saw him as maybe a bit of a Tumamina.
Yes, look, very much so. But I mean, I think for me it's just that, it's something that's so like you talk about, in relation to Tito.
Yes.
It's something that's so, I mean, it's such a trivial thing, but you go and commit fraud as an MEC for a vehicle. I mean, my goodness, you earn so much, you could buy the vehicle you want.
Political career on wanting to drive a brand new vehicle. Now, here's the question I want to ask both of you. The reason why he apparently doesn't want to drive this vehicle, apart from the lies that he said, because he's, in the fake letter it says that his life was at risk and the vehicle is actually perfectly safe to drive, is that his rival was the former MEC, and he fell out with Sihle Zigalala, and so he doesn't want to drive the vehicle of his rival, and that's pretty petty. I mean, it doesn't get more petty than that, especially if you're in the same party, Daniel.
Yeah.
And he's also a member of the Youth League. So this is the supposed generation that is supposed to take the Tumamina campaign forward.
Yeah.
Does it bode well for the governing party?
Well, it doesn't at all, and I think that's what I was saying about what interested me about you saying that he was more connected to the Ramaphosa camp. And I think that we all kind of labor under the delusion that there's the good guys and the bad guys within the ANC, and this certainly does muddy those waters, as so many incidences this year have. And
absolutely. And let's take a look at the City Press. I mean, it's pretty much the same story, Sabelo. Essentially, the minister, Ayanda Dlodlo, is at war with her directors general, saying that there are so many people that are redundant in the state security services, people that are being paid for jobs that they're not in, and she's getting stick from her employees and from the people that she's responsible for. To such an extent that they have threatened to basically undermine her. Yeah. And the interesting thing that I read when I read that piece was, she said, you must remember, before I was a minister, I was an administrator in the Scorpions. And she was, of course, also Minister of Public Administration, which was concerned with the public wage bill. Yeah. Is this a continuation of the complete disregard for the tightening of belts and the cutting of fat that is coming from the government that we're seeing in sections of the state?
Well, I mean, it's particularly interesting that it's state security. I mean, I was thinking when I was reading that you could literally go back a couple of months, swap the headline, have Dipuo Letsatsi Duba, have her picture there. It's exactly the same thing. The only thing missing, which I suppose is likely to happen, is that there's going to be an anonymous dossier dropped off at the public protector, and then there's going to be a standoff between the PP and, Minister Lodlo. So this for me, actually, exactly what you're saying is the fact that there's a lot of people in their corners who feel like they can't be touched still.
Yes.
It's the remnants of the last 10 years.
Absolutely. That culture of impunity, Sabelo, we've got very little time. You've been going after a story that very few people have picked up on, and this is about the appointment of people to the Central Energy Fund.
Yes.
And you've picked up that Minister Gwede Mantashe has appointed somebody who is actually criminally accused in 2 cases.
Yeah.
Now, you remember when the ICASA chair had to be removed, it was because he was a convicted criminal. Yeah. How does someone like Mr. Mantashe Mantashe, who's in the top 6 of the ANC, who is supposed to be the embodiment of this Tuma Mina campaign, this reform campaign, appoints such an individual? How does such an individual even become eligible to serve on such an important institution? Was it a question of family connections?
Look, I think that's what we found. And I mean, that was the question for us, was how did it happen that this gentleman, and I mean, the cases is facing, it's basically running the rail safety regulator into the ground. Maladministration, corruption, you know, all of the things that you find in state-owned entities.
Just quickly, how does he relate to Mr. Mantashe?
So what we then found is that one of the things he did at the RSR was to actually create an entire division to accommodate Gwede Mantashe's nephew, who, when we spoke to people in the Eastern Cape, said he's basically like a son to him. Zuko Mantashe worked there first as is basically a business development, you know, specialist, like a sales manager in a regulator that just does assurance and quality, you know what I mean?
So that job wasn't even necessary?
No, I mean, months after Poya left the RSR, that position then became redundant, actually. You know, no one is in that position. He's the only person that ever served there. And then when he loses that job, he then pops up on the board of the CEF a couple of months later.
All right, gentlemen, we've run out of time, but it seems as if the Tuma Mina campaign is perhaps just with the president and a few of his closest allies. It looks as if he is being ignored, certainly at provincial level, and of course in the intelligence ministry. And now we also, of course, see Mr. Gwede Mantashe appointing someone to the Central Energy Fund that is an accused in 2 criminal cases. Well, you'll have to judge for yourself. That's your fix for the week. Take care. We'll see you again next week. Thank you for watching.